Are you tired of paying high egg prices for eggs at the store? Maybe you're a seasoned farmer who's just looking to improve your operation. Or maybe you're just starting out and just overwhelmed by all the information out there. Well, whatever situation you're in, this video is for you. We're going to demystify the process of raising chickens, from the backyard to the farm, and hopefully show you how to avoid a few common pitfalls that we've experienced. By the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a clear roadmap for raising healthy, productive chickens and enjoying fresh eggs, and even turning a profit if you're a small farm or homestead. All right, guys, let's get started. Go over in this video. 1, we're going to talk about planning and preparation. 2, we're going to talk about housing. 3, we're going to talk about feeding. 4, we're going to talk about health and hygiene. 5, we're going to talk about predator protection. We're going to talk about egg laying, brooding chicks, scaling up, and then if you stay to the very end of this, I'm actually going to break down our chicken operation, how many chickens we have, how much it cost us to get those chickens and maintain those chickens, and then also the revenue that we're getting in from the eggs those chickens produce. So a total cost profit summary. So hang around to the end to see that. All right, so part 1, planning and preparation. Obviously, got to do some planning and preparation if you're going to raise chickens. Even if you're getting 3 chickens or 300, you kind of got to have a plan going forward. One of the first things to do is, if you're in a suburban area, definitely check and see what your local laws are concerning chickens. Most places are pretty lax and will let you have a few chickens. Most of them will not let you have roosters. So just something to be aware of. You can check with your local county on that. You're also going to want to set a budget. Depending on how many chickens you're doing, how much are you willing to spend for this? There's solutions out there for everything. There's fancy solutions, there's DIY solutions. And so you sort of want to have a budget of what you're going to need for the other things we're going to talk about, which is housing, feed, and the other inputs that go into raising chickens. You're going to want to have picked out a suitable location for your chickens. Suitable location just means somewhere, one, that's convenient for you. You're going to be out there every day getting eggs, which is a good thing. So you want to make that easy for you. But you also got to think about if you have neighbors, where they're at. Shade is an important factor. If you want them to fit in with your aesthetics of your property, or if you're doing a farm, what pastures you're going to run. We'll get into housing here shortly, but you're also going to want to know where you're going to get your supplies from, know where your local ag stores are, your Lowe's, Home Depot, where you're going to get your lumber from. And then you're going to want to decide which breeds of chickens you're going to do. We do a breed called the Red Sex Link just because they produce a ton of eggs. They're a great production chicken, but there are so many chickens out there. They produce different color eggs, different size eggs, different amounts of eggs. And if you look down below, I've actually provided a link to Michigan State University, where they have a wonderful PDF chart that breaks down a ton of chicken breeds, gives you their behaviors, the number of eggs they produce, the color of the eggs, and that'll help you in making a good decision about what breed you want to go with. Again, that link's down below. So that's just a little bit on planning and preparation. Basically just doing a lot of research and trying to figure out what you want to do, where you want to do it, and how you're going to do it. All right, part 2 here, we're going to talk about housing. That's one of the things you have to decide in preparation is your housing. Are you getting a few chickens for your backyard, or are you getting a few hundred chickens for a farm operation? That's going to determine obviously what kind of housing you do. There are so many different houses out there. If you just Google chicken houses, you'll see small little houses made out of pallets. You'll see huge houses made out of refurbished RVs and trailers and buses. There's so many different ways to do it, and it really just depends on what your context is. If you're doing it in your backyard, typically you'll have a run, so you'll have a coop, and that'll be a stationary coop, meaning it'll be in one area. You'll make a run for the chickens that they can go around, scratch in, room to move around. If you're doing a farm operation, typically most farms will do some kind of mobile structure like the one you see back here. This is built on a hay wagon and can house up to about 300 birds. The purpose of being on a hay wagon is that once you get a lot of chickens, you have to be able to move them. They scratch a lot and they will tear up an area if you leave them there. So our plan is this house right here moves, we move it with our tractor and take it to new pasture once this pasture gets exhausted. I don't really have any recommendations on the type of coop or house or mobile. I would just say look online, Google chicken houses, and you will find a ton. And just find something that looks like it would fit your context. I'm a member of the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association. That's a mouthful. APA, as we call it, and they have a ton of resources. If you're raising backyard chickens, I would highly recommend, if you're serious about doing chickens, I believe it's $60 a year to join. They send out a monthly or bi-monthly publication. They have a forum where some of the best chicken farmers in the country share how they do things. They answer questions, and there's also a lot of different chicken house designs that these guys have done through trial and error and kind of figuring out all the pitfalls already. So again, that's the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association, or APA, and I'll have a link down below for that as well. A couple things to think about with your chicken house is, one, layer birds need roost. They love to roost. It's their protection. It's how they sleep at night. And you want a minimum of 6 to 7 inches of roost space per bird. So when you're designing your chicken house or coming up with how many birds you're going to have, just make sure they have at least 6 or 7 inches. A little more is better, but I'll find a lot of times too, the birds like to be side to side, so they will actually cram together, especially in the colder time. It keeps them warmer. So 6 inches is perfect. And that's kind of the general rule of thumb for roost space. For pasture space or roaming space, how much space to give them outside, we generally do 2 square foot per bird per day. Just to keep the math very simple, if you had 2 birds for a day, that would be 4 square feet. You weren't moving them for 2 days, then you would give them about 8 square feet. That's just a general rule of thumb. Again, you know, if you're doing a run, you can obviously put down wood chips, and we'll talk about that here shortly. If you're doing a stationary type coop, wood chips, sawdust, different things like that will go in the run and not a big deal. If you're doing them on pasture though, and especially if you're doing a number of birds, you want to make sure they have enough space. And again, the 2 square foot per bird per day is a good general rule of thumb to help maintain your pastures and to make sure the birds have enough space. That's for the outside where the chickens are going to be, you know, either in their run or out in the pasture. If you're for your shelter itself, general rule of thumb is about 1.5 square foot per bird. If you're doing a backyard setup, then the birds are typically going to go in at night, but then they're going to come out during the day. They're going to roam around in your run wherever you allow them to run. They're typically not going to stay inside. So again, a lot of times they're just sleeping in there. But during the winter time, when there's a lot of rain, they will spend time in there. So you need to make sure that they have enough room. I believe the industry standard, if you're looking at commercial, is somewhere around 0.6 to 0.7 square feet per bird. In my opinion, the bird itself is almost that big, so that's shoulder to shoulder birds.
Not cool.
And you don't want that. So, you know, generally 1.5 to 2 square foot per bird is generally a good rule of thumb. Again, it's a little on the big side and you can get by with less, but the thing is just making sure your birds are comfortable. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but you have mobile coops or chicken houses that move, and you have stationary coops that stay there. A lot of farms like we do use mobile coops because we do 200 birds at a time. They will just destroy an area if you leave them anywhere for long enough, and they just need to move. The other reason is that they poop a lot, and chicken manure is amazing fertilizer. So it's something that you definitely want to move them around your pastures, get that all spread out. You know, it actually gives your pastures a boost. It's great for the pastures. If you're doing a home setup or a backyard setup, again, you can use wood chips and different things that will absorb any manure. And then typically at times you just clean it out, you put that manure in a compost pile, let it compost, and then you've got some amazing compost for your garden, flower beds, plant beds, whatever you want to use it for. As far as cleaning or keeping your roost or your eggmobile, whatever you're using clean, our one that we're using back here actually has a graded floor. So when the chickens poop, it actually falls through the floor. At times it builds up, but maybe once every month and a half we have to get in there and do a little bit of cleaning. But otherwise, it falls through the floor, we move it to the next area, it falls, and you just keep doing that. If you're doing a stationary run, typically you're going to use wood chips or sawdust. Those are probably the best things to use. They absorb the moisture, they'll absorb the poop, they absorb the smell, and once it starts getting a little matted or much, you can actually just put another layer over it, and you can keep doing that almost like a deep bedding system. You'll get to a point where you need to clean it, and then it's either putting it out to compost, and then you can use it around your house. Again, you've got some of the most amazing compost you'll have. So that's how you do it if you're doing a stationary system. Again, chicken smell can get really high in ammonia. If you're smelling ammonia smell, that means either you need to be clean or you need more bedding. So that's just sort of a gauge. I would say it's actually a late warning light. You kind of want to take care of things before it gets to that point. But if you're smelling ammonia, that's definitely a sign that if you're in a mobile situation, you either need to move the coop, or if you're in a stationary situation, that you need to either add more bedding or change your bedding out. So that was housing. Now let's talk a little bit about feeding. Chickens are omnivores, meaning they will eat anything. They will eat grass, they will eat meat, they will eat bugs, they will pretty much eat anything that moves, and anything that pretty much they see, they'll peck at. All chickens do need supplemental feed. So while they're out on pasture or they're even in your run, you can definitely give them table scraps. You can give them, in the pasture, they're going to have bugs, they're going to have plants, forbs, different things to eat on, but they also have to have supplemental feed. We use a non-GMO from Sunrise Feed that, again, is non-GMO. We do about 200 birds, so it's about a 50-pound bag a day. And it's a mash, meaning it's a combination of non-GMO corn, soy, different things. It's all mashed up. We put those in feeders that drain, and that's where they eat from. You can also get chicken feed in pellets. I don't really know of any differences or recommendations either way. I haven't seen any problem with either. So it kind of just depends on what's available in your area and what you want to use. Again, you can get conventional feed. I don't typically recommend that, but non-GMO feed is kind of the second best. That's what we use. Organic feed is obviously top of the line. Just with having 200 birds and at a production model, we haven't been able to find organic feed that is affordable enough to make the eggs affordable. Meaning if we were to use organic feed, we charge $6 for our eggs a dozen, we would probably be up somewhere around $7 or $8, maybe even $9 to make that work, and we just don't have the market for that. It's expensive. Again, I would love to do it, and in a backyard situation that is much more doable. If you're doing 2 to 10 birds, definitely doable. Something I'd recommend. But just look at your location. You can check at places like Tractor Supply. Southern states will have feed. Where we're at in Central Virginia, we have Sunrise, which is actually, they just do a ton of feed. They make their own feed there. So that's where we get our feed from. It's a non-GMO. They even have soy-free, some different options. So there's also New Country Organics, which is near us in Central Virginia. They do organic. So there's lots of places around you. Look around. If you're at a farmer's market, obviously if you're a farmer, you may know a lot of this. If you're doing backyard stuff, go to your farmer's market. Find people that are doing eggs or raising chickens, and they'll be able to tell you all the local feed places, based on where they get their feed from. So that's a good resource. One thing with chicken feed is besides their feed, they need 2 things. One is grit. They must have grit. Chickens don't have teeth. So they basically get whatever they eat, it goes into their crop, which is for storage, and then it goes into a gizzard where it is chewed up. It's basically, the gizzard is a muscle, and it doesn't have teeth either. So the way it works is chickens will ingest rocks, different things that are hard. And by putting those in the gizzard, along with the food, that muscle just contracts and rubs it through those rocks, and that's what actually chews their food up. That's what breaks things up. So grit is a very important component of chicken feed. Not of their feed, but a supplemental thing that they need in addition to their feed. They will get some from the ground, but it's nowhere near enough. So we get a granite grit. Again, ag stores, your local feed supplier, they'll typically supply this. Usually comes in 50-pound bags, and we just put it in a bowl. It's like free choice, and they can get it when they want it. This is not only good for them, but it'll help you save money on feed. If you're not giving them grit, then their food is not being digested appropriately, so they're going to eat a lot more food. By using the granite and the grit, they will utilize their food a whole lot better, and it'll save you a lot of money in feed because it'll reduce the amount of chicken feed that they're eating. The other supplemental item that they need is calcium. One of the primary components of an eggshell is calcium. So when they start making eggs, they're spending a lot of calcium. And so what we provide is oyster shell. It's just crushed up oyster shell. It comes in a 50-pound bag. Again, you can find this at your local ag store. And we also give that as a free choice as well. So that's in a separate bowl. And we just keep that full. They can eat as much of it as they want. This will also go in, but it's absorbed through their intestines. They will break some of it up. It doesn't last as long as the grit. There are some people that will just use the oyster shell. I wouldn't recommend this. I would definitely recommend using the grit and the oyster shell. The grit will last a lot longer and do a much better job. And they really need that oyster shell. Like I say, it's going to break down, and they're going to use that for the calcium to produce those amazing eggs. All right, let's move on to watering. Watering is obviously important. Everybody needs water. And it's really important with chickens to make sure that they have clean water. They do peck a lot in the ground. They're in the mud. They're tearing, their beaks are in their food. And those beaks go into the water, so their waters will get dirty fairly regularly. So it is important that you just keep an eye on that and clean it. The other thing is that if you have water that sits out in the sun or anywhere it's getting light, it's likely going to grow algae. So that's another contaminant that you're just going to have to clean out. I don't know that it's that detrimental to chickens, but you don't want a bunch of that in there. So you definitely need to clean it with that as well. There are other closed watering systems that use nipples. There's drip systems. There's a ton of different things out there. We just use what we call our water wagon. And it's an old truck Jeep wheelie bed that has a 275-pound IBC tote. And we fill that tote up with water, And then there's a little connector on it that allows us to hook up a hose. I'll put a link to that connector below. We got it off Amazon. It's something we use, and we've even got a review video on it there. But it works great and allows you to run a hose off of an IBC tote. And being up on the truck bed, it's high, so it's just a gravity system. So it flows down to, we have a Premier One water. The water is okay. It does set out. We get a lot of algae, so I'm looking at some other options, but it's worked good for what we got. You can also just go to a pet store. They'll have little blue, red dishes that are hooked to a hose with a float. Those work just as well. So that's just one way of doing it. Again, you can fill water every day. You can buy tanks that will drain water. If you just look up chicken watering systems, there's a ton on there. This water wagon system is just how we do it, because I can put a lot in there. For 200 birds, you need a lot of water. So, and then being on the wagon, it allows us to move it with the chicken house. So as we move paddocks, as we move the house, the whole watering system moves with them. If you're doing a backyard setup, again, there's 5-gallon bucket setups you can get. There's so many different things. So just Google around and find something that you think will work for you. But main thing is important to have clean water. One thing we do with our water is we add apple cider vinegar. We do this probably about once a week, and we typically do 5 to 10 milliliters per gallon. It's not a ton, and this really helps. It almost turns the water, makes it like a probiotic. It helps the chickens with digestion. It also provides them with some minerals and vitamins as well. We've just found that our chickens, I think, are healthier on it. You do want to make sure that when you're using apple cider vinegar, that you get the vinegar with the mother. That means it hasn't been pasteurized and it has some of the fermentation process still going on. That's much better for the chicken's digestive system. So again, if you're looking for the apple cider vinegar, make sure it says the mother. And that's pretty much it for watering. Some apple cider vinegar, clean water, and you're good to go. All right, just real quick on health and hygiene. This could be a whole topic and video in itself. Chickens are pretty hygienic, so they pretty much take care of themselves. They do like to scratch and make dust baths. So wherever you have them at, they will dig little holes, they will throw dirt on them. And this is a way, it helps them remove mites, and it's just a way of taking care of themselves. So if you see them doing that, nothing wrong. That's what they're doing. They're taking care of themselves. Some people even provide a dust bath. You can use old charcoal. You can use, put a little bit of diatomaceous earth in there. Just get them a thing of sand or dirt. Really anything will help, and they'll definitely utilize it. So it's something they should have. If you're on a pasture, they'll make their own. And that is something you need to be aware of if you're following cattle and doing different things with your pastures. They will scratch areas that you may see some weed pressure after they've been on it. They provide great manure, but they also scratch a lot. Typically, just on a side note, on our pastures, we run our broiler or our meat birds on our pastures because they don't scratch as much. Our egg layers have their own dedicated pastures that towards the end of the year we'll bring the cattle into, but they just get a little bit more weed pressure than if we don't put them on the other pastures. We don't use any kind of antibiotics with our chickens, meaning that we don't use medicated feed, we don't put any antibiotics in their water. This is a commercial practice that sometimes their conditions are so bad they don't need it because they're sick, but they need it to prevent from getting sick. Again, we raise everything out here on pasture. So they've got sunlight, we've got the best sanitation there is. So again, I wouldn't use any medicated feed or anything like that. We will treat a bird if it gets sick. So if it's a bird that's sick and needs antibiotics, we'll treat it from our farm model. If we do have that happen and we treat it, we'll typically give the bird away so that it comes out of production, but goes to a good home where someone else can love it and take care of it. There are some vaccinations you can get for birds as babies. Coccidiosis is one, the common disease that birds can get. There's also Merrick's disease. There's a number of different things. Vaccinations are up to you. I know some people feel strongly about it, some people don't. I will say that there is a lot of buzz about animals getting an mRNA vaccine. We've had a number of people contact us about it. I am not aware that there's anything on the market available yet for that. I know there's probably some stuff in the works. It's not something we plan to use, and it's not something that we do use, obviously, because it's not out. So just if you read stuff about that, there is some news about that out there. But as my understanding, it's not available yet. And even if it is available, we don't plan to use it. And then just proper cleaning and sanitation. Again, that goes back to the housing. You know, if you smell ammonia, you definitely have to clean. If you have big rains, you have to watch out because chickens, again, scratch a lot. So they'll make a lot of mud, and that in turn can cause nasty conditions. So if you're in a closed-in area, that may mean placing more wood chips. If you're in a mobile unit, it may mean moving your egg mobile or your mobile coop a little quicker than you normally would to get them out of those conditions. So again, just keeping them and having a clean place for them will take care of a lot of your health issues. That, providing clean water, quality feed, do those things, and pretty much the rest will take care of itself. All right, now let's talk a little bit about predator protection. So you can see the netting behind us. This is electrified. You can see they have their shelter as well. That's another source of protection. And then if you can see right here, this is actually our dog shelter. So we've got 2 Great Pyrenees that hang out in here. What you doing, buddy? So this is 3 layers of protection we've done for our layer birds. Again, if you're doing a coop, you can do a totally enclosed system. You want to make sure you have good wire mesh. If you're doing a farm system, electric fencing helps, but it's not a guarantee. We've had foxes and stuff get through it. We've had aerial predators go over it. So it works to a degree. We found the dogs have been the best because they bark a lot. They're not in the paddock with the chickens, but they're outside the netting. So they stay relatively with the chickens and make enough commotion where when the dogs are with them, we don't have any problems at all. There's a lot of things that will get your birds. If you're actually missing birds, you probably need to worry about things like coyotes, foxes, dogs, birds of prey, such as hawks or owls. We have found conditions where we found birds missing their heads. And this is typically from birds of prey or raccoons. We've had chickens missing limbs. And again, usually that's raccoons or birds of prey. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you do have something happen to your chickens, trying to figure out exactly what happened to them will sometimes lead you to what's causing it. And then that in turn can help you prevent it, whether that's with fencing, dogs, reinforcing your closed-in system. So hopefully that just helps you, give you a little bit idea with that. Another good way is to lock your birds up at night. Our shelter here, we don't lock it up because they do well, but it has doors that would shut. So if we wanted to at nighttime, we could come shut it and then nothing can get in. It's totally closed off. And that's one way, like with your coops and different things. If you have a stationary coop, you can set it to lock them in at night. Again, it's a little bit more labor on your part. It means you're going out there at night to do it, and you're going out there in the morning to let them out. But then they even make automatic door openers for that. So there's a solution for every problem you have. It just depends on how much money you want to spend on it. Like I said, we found guard animals to be our best option. Whether that's a dog, we've seen people that actually use geese, guinea fowl, donkeys. There's a number of options. So depending on your context, that might just be something to look into. You can Google that and kind of see if there's one of those options that would fit your context. Again, we use Great Pyrenees and they're amazing. They bark a lot at night, so that's one thing you have to be aware of if you're thinking about going that route. But other than that, they're pretty self-sufficient. You feed them, water them, give them some love. They do an amazing job. Ours get rewarded with eggs, so they get some of the eggs that we get every day. We also give them scraps, and they're just great dogs. We love them. All right, guys, now let's talk about egg laying. For laying eggs, chickens need a laying box. Typically, you have the traditional ones like you see here, and then there's also what's called rollaway boxes, which are what we use here. Either box is fine. From a smaller scale, the regular egg boxes work great. You just put a little hay or some wood chips or something in the bottom. Chickens will lay eggs. You occasionally just take that out. You can just throw it on the ground. It'll compost with everything else. And the rule of thumb with those boxes is typically about 4 to 5 birds for every hole you have. So for instance, if you have 12 birds, then you'll want to have at least 3 boxes, 3 holes for them. They usually come in, 6. I think you can get them up to 12. There's a bunch of different sizes on those. You can also build your own. There's a lot of plans online for that. But chickens like to go into a shelter to lay their eggs. So about 4 to 5 birds per 1 box. If you're using the rollaway boxes, which are what we use these because we're getting anywhere between 150 and 200 eggs a day, and that's a lot of washing. And the rollaway boxes allow the eggs to be laid, but rather than the chicken sitting on them, once they lay the egg rolls into a compartment where the chicken can't get to them. So it keeps the eggs a lot cleaner and takes a whole lot of labor out of us having to wash the egg. So that's why we use the rollaway boxes. We have 4 on our setup back here. We could probably use another one, but that's where we're at right now with our setup. But the rollaway boxes, also they are expensive. I think they're about $200 a piece. We have a large one that'll do around 45 to 50 birds each. You can get smaller ones. They come in different sizes as well. So it really depends on your context, how many birds you're doing, what kind of setup you have. There's options for everything. So just look around. A good place to find a lot of these is Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. You can get good deals on these, and it's a good place to find them for a lot cheaper. Another thing that'll really help with keeping your eggs clean is if you can close the nest boxes at night. either nest box, rollaway, or the regular traditional, come with a roost that sits in front of the box. If you can, it's a great idea to, in the evening or afternoon, to go ahead and close those up. Sometimes chickens will want to sleep in there, and that means they poop a lot in there, and then they lay their eggs, it rolls through the poop, and then you just got dirtier eggs that takes you longer to wash. So by closing up your boxes at night, they can't get in there, so they won't sleep in there. They'll get back on their roost where they're supposed to be, and then you get cleaner eggs. By them not being in there, they're not pooping as much, and so you're getting much cleaner eggs. You can do this manually. We have some automatic ones on ours called perch poppers that come with our best nest boxes that we have. I'll put links to those below. They're very expensive, but again, from a production standpoint, the time that it saves us in cleaning eggs makes up for the cost over time. So it's an investment, but something that, again, everything comes down to context. It's what you're doing, how many birds you're doing, what you're using the eggs for, you selling, you keeping them for yourself, and just making things efficient. Again, we also have cattle, we have pigs, we have meat birds, we have horses, we have a lot of other animals we have to do chores with. So finding efficient ways on our farm, rollaway boxes and perch poppers, save us a lot of time and having to wash eggs, and makes it easier to get the eggs. Brooding chicks. This is something that if you're going to get baby chicks, you have to know about, and that's brooding. Typically when you get baby chicks, they can't just go into the shelter like this or into your run. You usually have to have an area that they'll stay warm in, dry, and that's where they learn to eat, learn to do the chicken things they need to do to survive. So typically most people have boxes. Just square boxes work great. You can buy feed troughs, people use those. We actually have, it was our very first chicken mobile. It housed about 40 or 50 chickens, and it was basically a shed we built from the ground up on wheels on a trailer, and now it's our brooder. It got too small, and honestly I built it way too heavy for the trailer that it's on. So it's stationary now, and that's what we use as our brooder. So the brooder, again, just where you raise the baby chicks. If you're doing meat birds, that's generally the first 2 to 3 weeks they'll be in the brooder. You'll have heat lamps that help to keep them warm. They're in a safe environment. There's wood chips on the ground that soak up their manure. And this is basically where they just learn and grow, and they don't have feathers to begin with. They have like a down, just a soft hair, and they have to get those feathers out to help really keep them warm. So until they're feathered out, as they say, you really don't want to put them out of the brooder until that happens. For the layer birds, they can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks in your brooder. They grow out a little bit slower and take a little more time. Again, it depends on your climate and where you're at. But the main things with the brooder, again, it's just a safe environment. It can be anything from a box to a shed. And you want to have heat lamps that helps to provide heat if they need it while they're feathering out. In summer months, not so much. Yeah, here in Central Virginia, it's I think 91 degrees today. It's really hot. So we actually have chicks coming this week. We have 100 meat birds coming, which we're waiting on the phone call now. And they'll go in the brooder, and we'll have a heat lamp or 2 set up. But again, when it's this hot, we're usually opening windows to make sure they have enough ventilation. That's another point with the brooder, is you want to have good ventilation. That helps keep things sanitary. And a cleaner area means a healthier chick. So good ventilation definitely helps, whether that's having an open on the top of the box, you're in some kind of structure, having some windows or something that you can open and close and kind of control the airflow. You definitely just want to have good ventilation so that bad things, air can escape, and good fresh air can come in. As far as bedding for your brooder, again, we use wood chips, so the same thing you would use in a run. Some people use peat moss. That's been an option, but that's not really a sustainable option as I understand it. So we don't use that. Wood chips have worked great. Sawdust works great. There's a number of options, but basically you just want something that's going to soak up the manure and help to keep things clean. As far as when the chicks arrive, typically they have food just like the other chickens have, but we give them what's called a chick starter. So it's a much more finely ground since they don't have things in their gizzard like rocks and stuff to help crush things up. It helps them digest better. And then clean water. Those are the 2 main things that they need. The other things that we'll actually add to the water are just table sugar, and then sometimes honey. We found this just gives some nice electrolytes and a nice little supplement to what they're getting in the first day or so. You can buy commercial, you'll see electrolyte solutions and different stuff. I typically don't recommend those. Reason being is that baby chicks can get something called pasty butt, where they will poop, and a lot of that poop will dry on their butts and actually block up their vent where the poop can't get out. A lot of this comes from just not being able to process, not having enough water, and dehydration. And we found that a lot of the electrolyte kits that you get to add to water is a salt base, and what that does is just help to dry them up a little more, which worsens things like pasty butt and those things you can get. So what we recommend doing is just using either some honey, a little bit of sugar in the water, and I'm talking about like a spoonful in the water, honey, maybe a tablespoon or 2 per gallon, a tablespoon or so per gallon. And by doing this, you'll get good effects as far as giving them a little energy, giving them a little boost to get them started. So that's kind of some basic things. Let's say you want to scale up. Scaling up means you're doing it already and you decide, well, I really like this, I want to get more. Really, things you have to think about there are, one, is your housing system going to accommodate more birds? If that does accommodate more birds, is there run or outdoor pasture, is that going to accommodate more birds? So there's some things to think about when you do that. Also, obviously, scaling up means more feed. If you're moving chicks, it means that there's going to be more manure, more scratching, so you may have to move more frequently. So scaling up, like anything else, usually involves more infrastructure, more time and planning, but typically I recommend going back to step one of this video, which is your planning and preparation. Before you scale up, you've already done it once, you've already got some experience, so think about those things and what you need to expand upon to scale up to meet your needs. All right, now let's get into the goodies. I told you guys if you stayed to the end, we would talk about our operation, how much it cost us to run it, and how much money we're making off of it. So let's get into it. First, let's get into the cost. How much are we spending on our birds? Our birds, as far as feed, they go through a bag a day, a 50-pound bag of non-GMO food per day. And that cost us $17.95 a bag is what we pay. So you multiply that times 365 days and you've got $6,551.75 per year. So that's how much we're spending a year, or $6,500 in feed. Grit, we go through a bag of grit about once a month. So our bag of grit costs $15. So multiply that times 12, you get about $180 in grit a year. Our oyster shell, that costs about $22 a bag, and we again go through that about once a month as well. So we're getting about 12 bags a month. You multiply 12 times $22 and we're spending $264 in oyster shell. All right, and then one of the main factors you have to figure into cost is your labor. A lot of people don't include this, but it's one of the most overlooked things that will probably cost you the most on your farm. So we factor that in. So we use $15 an hour labor as a labor cost. Again, you can change this to fit your context, and it roughly takes us about an hour a day. Some days it may take a little less, some days it may take more if we're moving netting and moving the shelter, but it averages out to about an hour a day. So once you factor that in, $15 a day times 365 days a year, you have $5,475 in labor cost. So altogether, running 200 layer birds and the cost of getting the eggs from that operation cost us roughly $12,470. Now, I am excluding things like the layer house, the egg mobile that they use, and the Premier One netting. And the reason for that is that this is stuff we've had for years. Well, the egg house is a newer that we just built this year, but it'll be used for a number of years, and so that gets amortized over time. So asset type permanent structures we don't necessarily cost. We're mainly looking at what is it costing us to run this business. This is more of what you would consider an asset. So, you know, if I wanted to, I wouldn't necessarily deduct it, because if I need to, I can sell this Premier One netting, I can sell this structure and get the money from that. So we don't factor those in. Those are kind of the upfront startup costs. Again, what I'm really trying to dig down into is what is it costing me versus what am I making to run this operation. Now let's get into the good stuff. Are we making any money on eggs? So we do 200 redless sex links is what we run. We do have one white leghorn, which you might see running around. So technically 201 birds, but let's just say 200 birds. We get about 260 to 300 eggs a year. So just going 260 eggs a year on the low end, that's about 52,000 eggs a year. It's a lot of washing. You divide that by 12, which would be a dozen eggs, then you're getting about 4,333 dozen eggs per year. We sell our eggs for $6 a dozen. And if you multiply that times 4,333 dozen, you get $25,998. So if you look at strictly our revenue from the eggs versus the cost of producing those eggs, we are making a profit of $13,527 a year off of 200 birds. But it's a lot of work that goes into that. The chickens are the most labor-intensive thing we have on the farm. So it's something you have to think about. One thing if you're doing that alone, but when you're also raising cattle, you're raising pigs, you have horses, you have children that you're homeschooling, you have to think about what operations are giving you the most bang for your buck, giving you the most profit for your time. Also, these calculations are rough estimates. Again, this doesn't include that sometimes eggs are in the dirt and we just have to throw them away. Sometimes eggs get cracked. We get sick birds, we lose a bird occasionally, so that changes the numbers a little bit. Feed costs can change. That price goes up, then your profit or your margin goes down. So there's a number of external factors, but this just gives us a rough estimate of what we're spending a year versus how much these eggs are bringing us in a year. If we really want to confirm this, typically what we do is we use QuickBooks, and at the end of the year I can actually look and see for the layers how much I spent in feed. I have a general idea of the time, and then I can compare that to how much money we actually made in eggs for the year. We may do another video on that in the future about how to set up your QuickBooks, or if you're using software, to really break down your enterprises by enterprise, and then break those down by feed and vet bills and disposables and different things. But that would be a way to go back and check it. But these are general numbers, and I hope you found that helpful. I hope it gives you kind of some idea of what it takes to raise chickens. I hope it gives you some ideas if you're thinking about getting ready to start raising chickens. And all in all, they're just a really rewarding experience. We got started in chickens. They're kind of the gateway drug per se. You start with them and it leads to other things. They're great for the manure they provide for compost and pastures. They're relatively simple. Again, there's a lot of labor that goes. Sometimes you have to clean, sometimes you have to do stuff, but as far as just taking care of them, they're pretty simple. If you've taken care of a cat or a dog, I mean, you have to feed them every day, you have to water them every day, occasionally you have to brush them, you have to do things. So chickens, you're not brushing them, but they have their own things that you have to do, and it's not hard. And the big bonus is that you get eggs. Eggs are perfect for you. You can eat them by themselves. You can make sandwiches. You can make cakes. You can use them for so many different things. We give a lot away, if somebody buys, say, beef shares and different things, we'll throw in a couple dozen eggs as a thank you. And it's something that people love to get, is farm fresh eggs, and real farm fresh eggs. I'm not talking about the store with the pretty chickens and the pasture raised all over the box. I'm talking about real pasture raised farm fresh eggs, straight from the farm down the street. So again, you can do this. It's easy. Start small. If you think about scaling up, go for it. And again, hope you found this video helpful. We've gotten a lot of subscribers over the past couple days, and we really appreciate that. That helps the channel. So hopefully that means some of the stuff we're putting out is good and you're enjoying it. Again, if you'll give us a subscribe and a like, it helps the channel, and you're helping a small farm. The more we get, the more the message gets out there, and the more it helps us as a farm. So like and subscribe. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. All right, bye.